Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. Today, we're going to be tackling a case that really shook India, like, to its core, and became a really big international story, the 2024 Kolkata rape and murder.
Yeah, this case, it's one of those things that just keeps spiraling outward. You know, you start with this just awful, horrific act of violence against this young doctor, but then so quickly you find yourself kind of face to face with these huge issues, systemic issues, you know, safety, corruption, just the power of public anger and what it can do.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we're going to try to unpack today, using as our main source this Wikipedia article on the case. And you know, you might know some of the basic details of this case already. It was a big one, but we're going deeper than that today, going beyond just the headlines and looking at like the details, the ripple effects, you know, the things that make this tragedy such a grim look into some bigger societal issues.
And we're going to do all of that while also, you know, being mindful of legal boundaries. Of course, we won't be naming the victim in this deep dive, but her story, her presence, it's kind of the foundation for everything we're going to talk about today. It's why we're here.
Exactly. So to really wrap our heads around this case, I think we have to rewind a bit, go back to August 9th, 2024. Just imagine Kolkata, right? The city's alive, it's bustling, everyone's rushing around as always. And right in the thick of it, you have the very well-known, well-respected R.G. Carr Medical College and Hospital. That's where our victim, a very hardworking postgraduate trainee doctor, she's just finished this grueling 36-hour shift.
Oh gosh, just try to imagine that for a second. The exhaustion, the level of dedication, right? And after all that, she has this meal with some of her colleagues. It's this brief, you know, kind of normal, even happy moment before she heads to a seminar hall to get some much needed rest. Just a simple decision, but tragically a fatal one.
It's really frightening how fast everything went from, you know, totally normal to absolutely horrific. So the next morning, her body is found right in that same seminar hall. And here's where things get even more disturbing, right? Instead of launching this immediate investigation into what is so obviously a violent crime, the college authorities, get this, try to pass it off as a suicide. Can you believe that?
It's mind-blowing, this attempt to cover up what happened. And right from the start like that, I mean, it really says something, doesn't it? It makes you think about, like, the balance of power in a situation like this. You know, the lengths that these big institutions will go to protect themselves, their image, even when something this awful happens. But the truth always finds a way, doesn't it?
It really does. It always does. And in this case, the truth. It came out in the most horrible way you could imagine, the autopsy report. This was not a suicide, not even close. This young doctor had been brutally raped and murdered. We're talking strangulation, deep wounds, signs of a struggle. Even investigators, people who have seen it all, were shocked by the level of violence.
Yeah, and those details, as awful as they are to hear, they become the catalyst for everything that follows, right? This just brutal attack. Such clear evidence of this violent act. It shattered that attempted cover-up immediately. And from those ashes rose this firestorm of anger and sadness, not just in the medical world, but across India.
All right, so picking up where we left off in this Kolkata case, we've got the civic volunteer, Sanjay Roy, right? And he's been arrested, but his story's looking, well, let's just say a little iffy, right? And now the CBI, the big guns, they're on the scene. And guys, what happens next is like something out of a movie, seriously.
Doesn't it, though? You've got the CBI. These guys, they're known for being thorough, right? So they start digging, and they uncover this whole trail of, like, corruption, lies, deceit, you name it. It goes way beyond just this one awful event.
It's like they're pulling on a loose thread and this whole other sweater just starts unraveling.
Exactly, that's a great way to put it. And suddenly, all eyes are on this new guy, this Sandeep Kumar Ghosh, the principal of the medical college.
Okay, so what makes this Ghosh character so interesting to the investigation all of a sudden?
Well, for starters, the CBI, they start finding all this shady stuff, right? Financial stuff that's just not adding up. People saying evidence was messed with, even rumors of a cover-up. And not just by Ghosh, but some of his buddies high up at the college, too. Remember how they tried to say it was a suicide at the beginning? The CBI, they start connecting the dots, and guess whose name keeps popping up?
This Ghosh guy sounds like he was playing with fire. So with all this evidence, he's got to be in some deep trouble, right?
You'd think so, right? But, oh, it gets crazier. So, gosh, he cracks under pressure, right?
Yeah.
Totally expected. He resigns. Seems like maybe, finally, some justice. But get this, almost immediately, He gets another job leading another fancy medical college.
Oh, come on. Seriously, that's outrageous. It's like they're rewarding him for this whole mess.
Tell me about it. People were furious. The Calcutta High Court even had to step in, made him take a break from the new job, at least for a while. But it didn't stop there. The Indian Medical Association, they were like, nope, we're done with you, and they kick him out. And then finally, the CBI makes their move. Ghosh is arrested. All that financial stuff, the cover-up, it all catches up with him.
It's almost unbelievable. I mean, we started with this one suspect, and it's like the investigation just cracked open this whole other story, this deep, dark system of corruption that might go all the way back to the young doctor's death.
And you know, when people saw that connection, this brutal murder and this potential high-level cover-up, that's when things really exploded. Protests all over India.
And we're not talking about a few small demonstrations here. This was massive, right? Nationwide outrage.
Absolutely. Doctors everywhere. I mean, everywhere. They were heartbroken, they were angry, they were scared, honestly. And they all felt so helpless. So they decided, enough is enough. They put down their stethoscopes, whatever they were doing, and took to the streets. Justice for their colleague, that was the main thing, of course, but also they wanted to feel safe in their hospitals. And that's powerful. Thousands upon thousands of doctors all united. Everything just stopped.
Wow. Imagine seeing that, a sea of white coats, all demanding change. You can't deny the emotion, the personal stake they all felt. This wasn't just their job, it was personal.
It really was. And that's what's so important to remember, I think. This wasn't just about one awful death anymore. It became this symbol, you know, this symbol of the fight for women's safety, for someone to be held responsible when these horrible things happen, for a system that actually protects the people it's supposed to protect. And it wasn't just doctors who felt that way, not at all.
Yeah, I mean, you think about those Women Reclaim the Night protests that were happening, right? This wasn't about like hospitals or being a doctor at all. This was about women from every walk of life saying, we deserve to feel safe, to walk down the street, especially at night, and not live in fear. Really powerful stuff.
Absolutely. And it went beyond India, too. Celebrities here, celebrities in other countries even, they were talking about it, using their voices to make sure people knew what was going on, putting pressure on those in charge. And it worked. There were protests in Bangladesh, in the UK, even in the US. It became this global thing. It just goes to show you this fear of violence against women. It's everywhere. It's a human issue, not just an India problem.
Man, it really makes you think, doesn't it? As horrifying as all this is, it forced people to face some really uncomfortable truths about their own countries, their own communities. But let's talk about the elephant in the room here. The government. They were under so much pressure, the whole world was watching. How did they handle all of this?
Well, it was not complicated. There were definitely attempts to calm everyone down, to show that they were doing something. But whether those attempts really meant anything, or if it was too little too late, well, that's the million-dollar question.
All right, so we're back, and it's time to finish unpacking this Kolkata case. We've seen this horrific crime, the attempted cover-up, the protests, the outrage. And as we left off, the government was trying to figure out how to respond to all of it.
Yeah, and it was a tough spot to be in, no doubt. So on the one hand, you've got the West Bengal government, and they're putting forward this new bill, right? The Apprehended Woman and Child Bill, they called it. The idea was to really strengthen the laws against any crimes against women and children, which on paper sounds like exactly what people wanted, right? Stricter punishments, faster trials, more resources dedicated to all of it. Sounds good. But there was this feeling, and it was a big one, that this was more about damage control than actual change, you know?
Right, look at us, we're doing something. But does it really go deep enough? I mean, imagine being one of those protesters pouring your heart out, demanding justice, and then they're like, here's a new law, might work, might not.
Exactly. It felt very, I don't know, surface level to a lot of people, especially because, you have to remember, the chief minister, she wasn't exactly on the best terms with those protesting doctors. They wanted her to be transparent, to be held accountable. They even said they wouldn't meet with her unless it was broadcast live for everyone to see. That's a big statement. Shows you how little trust there was.
Wow. So did she agree to that live meeting?
You know what? She did. It was pretty surprising. She actually went to the protest unannounced, talked to the doctors. A lot of people saw that as her trying to make things right, you know? And it seemed to work. She listened to them, promised she'd get justice, and yeah, agreed to that live meeting.
Talk about the power of standing together, right? They demanded change and they got it. But what came of that meeting? Was it all just for show?
Actually, no. Some real things happened. For one, the Kolkata police commissioner. Gone. Remember how everyone was saying the police totally messed up at the beginning? This wasn't nothing. Sure, it was symbolic, but it was a win for the people who wanted someone held responsible.
Definitely a win, but like you said, it's one guy. The whole system's still got issues, right?
100%. And that's what makes this whole case so significant. Yeah, there were good things that came out of it. People were held accountable, new laws were made, but the root of the problem, the reasons why something like this could even happen, it's going to take a lot more than a few quick fixes.
So where do we even begin to tackle that? What can we learn, really take to heart from this whole thing?
I think the biggest takeaway, for me anyway, is how important it is to speak up, to make your voice heard. This young doctor, her death, as awful as it was, it started a movement. It forced people to face some ugly truths. It challenged the people in charge, and it brought some real change, even if it wasn't enough. It reminds us that we can't just sit back and let these horrible things happen. We got to keep talking about it, keep pushing for better, keep fighting for a world where these stories aren't just headlines, but they're unthinkable.
Really powerful stuff. And listeners, as you go about your day, remember this young doctor, remember the people who bravely stood up in her name, and remember that change, even though it's hard, it's always possible. This has been heavy for sure, but it was important. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and most importantly, stay engaged.